Probably at least, sort of rough and ready estimates suggested that if you're doing the same thing on farm, you'd be paying about 8 cents per cubic metre. So it is really substantial. And there's a couple of factors behind that, Councillor. One is the scheme can obviously cannot bulk purchase pumps, etc., in a much more efficient way than on an individual farm scale. The maintenance deal is a whole lot more efficient, and also what we have done is we have used some of the energy generation off the power station at the dam to do some of the pressure. So we've priced that as well. So it's that's the sort of process that's got to that point. And probably the other significant thing in it is that from a farmer's perspective, the less complex the conversion process and the on-farm infrastructure process on-farm, the easier it is to enter the scheme, really. So we're taking some of that complexity out of the arrangement. Fair to say, and Andy will be well across this in the South Island, that virtually, all the schemes, a huge proportion of the infrastructure upgrade going on in the South Island is moving old irrigation infrastructure to pressurised systems, basically. Whereas what you're seeing is that come through here. I would note, though, and this is important also, is that there will be instances where water will be available either off the main stem of the river or tributaries, and in that case, clearly, the price would be the take-or-pay price, not the variable price. Okay. So, by and large, we think we've done well there, Graham. Graham, do you want to comment quickly, because it's been a huge proportion of your work for the last few years actually, plus intensive the last 3 months.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Just reinforcing that previous point, that there is a significant degree of pumping and pressurisation associated with the scheme through what was the primary head brace component of the scheme. So in fact, there were significant advantages in simply upspecking those to provide the on-farm element of that. So we already had a significant chunk built in that was a requirement to shift water around within the actual primary and secondary network, and therefore the additional pumping was, as Andrew said, supporting the benefit of that. It was actually bolting it on to an additional element that we've currently got. Probably not a lot more to add. I mean, certainly it's been a tortuous process through this November till 14th of Feb, negotiating what was a host of refinements or optimisation opportunities. They were well identified in the submissions put to us, so at least it gave us a clear way forward once we'd been able to select a preferred position. And while it's taken a little bit longer, certainly have landed in a solid position around the offer that's currently on the table. The final element of that, which is, I think I've commented here toward the end of March, is that we are looking to just refine the final terms and conditions. So they were offered up as part of the submissions process. There were elements of that were questioned through that process, but none of those are fatal flaws. They were sort of minor in detail that we need to finalise as part of landing where we are. So we don't foresee anything at this stage that would stop us getting to a signed position, certainly by financial close in June.
Councillor Belford.
Just following up Peter's question about the savings from the optimisation process, the number that was generally put out previous to this was that the on-farm cost of the scheme would be in the 300 million range. What's the impact of this on that number? The things you've just been describing?
Oh, I haven't calculated. To be fair, Tom, I haven't actually gone back and calculated the $300 million number versus the internalisation of the energy. We've done that at a scheme level and a price level, basically, at this point. But look, it's fair to say that that number is reasonably speculative, frankly, in terms of on-farm conversions. It's absolutely driven by the land use type, by contour, by the specific situations, and so forth. So suffice to say is what we've done at our end of the deal is we've simplified it and made it efficient at that point. So I'll take.
Councillor Graham.
Yeah, Graham, question, that's great pressure.
Can you maintain that right throughout the system? I mean, you get it at the beginning. Can you keep that pressure at the end?
Yeah, good question actually, because initially we actually targeted 40 metres or 4 bar as they refer to, which is an upper limit driving pressure through that optimisation phase, and certainly the experience of some of the South Island schemes and the refinement around new technology, particularly with pivot irrigators, that they're looking at nearer that sort of 35 or even 30 metres of head. So we pitched it at 35, believing that would cover the range of large-scale irrigators. And the issue we have is, in fact, because, well, it's a bit of a misnomer, we talk about the Ruataniwha plains, it's actually a relatively steep plain. So, in fact, the issue we have is relieving pressure at the second half or the downstream end of it. So we have, if you can appreciate, if you've seen it, we've got the primary head race canal into a large pipe and then a spider network of smaller secondary pipes. Most of the downstream ends of those, or the downstream half of those, are actually relieving pressure. So there's some advantage in terms of some probably saying, well, if they have a reasonable distance from the point of the boundary, which is where we have an obligation to supply, that we may be able to drive 50, 60 metres of head to satisfy something that may be a kilometre or two away. So yeah, our obligation was to provide that to everyone. So obviously it's the uphill or the the uphill pumping section that we have to solve that with. We actually relieve pressure through the lower half.
Mr. Barker.
I see that you have negotiated a fixed price, fixed term contract. With a fixed price contract, the contractor will build in a margin to cover, because they're going to absorb the risk. When you decided to go for that, rather than design and construct and pay as you way, can you just talk me through why you decided to go for fixed price and a built-in margin for the contractor, as opposed to taking the risk ourselves?
I think that keep it really simple here. We've clearly got two bits of infrastructure. We've got a dam and a reservoir, and we've got a distribution network. So really the fixed time, fixed price component, in our view, is absolutely fundamental for the dam structure, where the risk allocation to the contractor is they're the best equipped to handle that risk issue. Now, in the contractual form, you'll see there'll be various issues such as force majeure and so on that will be negotiated as ultimately part of the deal. But the whole point, and this is a contractual form used particularly outside of New Zealand, is fixed price, fixed time for that type of complex infrastructure is considered to be the norm. When we move on to the distribution network, and I'll get you to comment, Graham, on risk in a minute. When we move on to the distribution network, what we've done is we've got a fixed time, fixed price on the head race, the major distribution artery, if you want. And what we've negotiated is effectively a set of schedules around what we call a secondary distribution network, which leaves flexibility effectively to say, which comes back to that question that I think, in fact, you asked, Councillor Barker, around, well, somebody's way up there and they're on the 40%, and are we going to supply them? In reality, what we're going to do, assuming this thing is built, is we're going to build and optimise the secondary network around demand, where it's sensible to go. And in that particular case, what we've negotiated, or what Graham and the team have negotiated, is a set of schedules within a bounds of certainty, if you like. So what we're doing is we're allocating risk to where it most appropriately belongs, with those able to best manage it, on the one hand. And then where it's sensible we've got a set of schedules. It's the simple way to look at it. But Graham, you might want to build on that.
Perhaps just stepping back from that question. Initially, we spoke to all the major players, obviously in New Zealand first and foremost. They came out of the woodwork, in Australia. And we looked at basically the design and build, or design and construct principle, and then, as you say, there's various forms and fashions of that. And it was certainly our discussions, particularly with the international players, around, well, what model best suited this type of project. It's a large project. It's not unique. It has those unique elements that are levels of confidence, and I'll refer to it in a minute as separable portions. But we actually sought the advice of those international players around, well, what was a mechanism that would actually encourage them to come to the table to give us the best price for this, irrespective of what the model we used. And because we, as Andrew said, particularly around the dam, we were looking for that level of expertise around the dam design detail specifically, and construction techniques. And the clear advice was that if we wanted a very competitive process with access to and a clear understanding about what's been put on the table, firstly a 2-horse race was the way to do it. That if there was more than 2 people, the costs of mobilising, preparing and actually competing for this sort of work is hugely expensive, and if you dip out, well then, and in this instance where we're not paying bid costs, it's a significant commitment from the players. So the first message we took a couple of years ago was that make it a 2-horse race and you'll get 2 people that believe they are well and truly capable of winning this, and you'll get a competitive bid. And then in the structure of the contract documents and the submissions, we clearly identified all the things we expected to see, and it was right down into margins and percentages, inflation adjustments, foreign exchange, all that stuff was identified to us. And again, quite a sensitive issue, because in one breath they're saying, well, hang on, you want a fixed price, fixed time, we should be able to just say we're going to build you this for X, and you should have access to none of that detail. And hence it's been quite a demanding or sensitive process that we've actually had to distill down into issues around labour rates, hourly rates, all those sorts of adjustments for what is a 3 or 4 year project, and be confident that A, we understood what they were, and B, that they were within the realms of something that we would or could commit to. And it was actually that level of detail that we were had access to, and were able to make comparisons between the 2 entities to be very clear about what we're paying, where the risks sat, and where it should appropriately sit between ourselves and the principal and or the contractor. So it was a form and structure for a large scale project. It was about getting the competitive, skilled, financially viable major players to the table, and it was equally importantly that we were able to distill and see the detail that sat behind the contract as we've had to negotiate a final position around cost and conditions.
Yeah, it might be, Graham, just a point I might make too is we've followed what's called a design and construct procurement process here, which again, in some cases, for some infrastructure in this country in particular, what you'll get is you'll get your feasibility, you'll then get a design process underway, and ultimately when you've got the detailed design, you'll procure the contractor to fulfill it. What we've deliberately done is look to, for a couple of reasons, look to run a design and construct process which puts those two things together. There's 2 effects. The first effect, it reduces interface risk. So in other words, you're not dealing with separate designers versus separate contractors, so interface risk is simplified.
Yep.
And the second thing it does is it speeds things up enormously and actually reduces risk in the price you get. Now, I'm not going to name projects, but there are projects in New Zealand that have done it the other way around of this type, have gone through a detailed design process, which is really, really expensive and slow, and would have pushed, probably based on the pitch we got in feasibility, would have pushed this phase out from effectively what's been to final negotiation at this point, Graham, about a 12-month process. It would have pushed it out to at least 2, if not 3 years. So we've been quite deliberate about it, and part of the advice we've had is sitting in the mix. We've got 2 key advisors that outside of the constructors who bid into this process that we've used to proof test that. One is we've had National Australia Bank sitting in behind BNZ, who are effectively the infrastructure team, advisory team out of NAB. Very significant experience in this area. And in addition to that, we've had Snowy Mountains Engineering Corporation, or SMEC, as the technical engineer. Again, very significant international expertise in this area. So it's been that sort of approach we've brought to determining which way we go with it.
So my next question was to follow up. Now, I guess you're going to have difficulty in answering it. But in every case that I've seen where there's design and construct and the risk sits with the contractor builds in a margin. And there's various pitches to what it is.
Yep.
Are you aware of what their margin is, and are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Chairman,
Yes.
I'd prefer if this discussion was to be held over until the business case. Councillor Barker is going into territory that we simply do not want to discuss in a public forum.